What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And I was asked a question last night in a live about earning tattoos, and so figured I'll get into it. Right, quick little video. Today is the 3rd of October, and I've committed to dropping a video every day of this month on the Homie Hangout. And I will still get to Radical Reacts as I get a chance. And I'm working on some more bigger stories for you guys. I did a video yesterday about Haley Nieto. She had lost her life at the hands of this dude who I'm familiar with from the Bay Area. Was a homeboy from South City, and then turned into a federal informant. And I guess came out here to Reno to hide out, and ended up taking the life of this 18-year-old girl. Um, so I did all that yesterday. I did that video, and her mom, April, actually reached out. And so we've been talking. She has some paperwork that she's gonna shoot me, so I'll be able to do an update on the case, some information that a lot of you guys probably didn't see and that the media didn't really cover, which I thought was interesting. And who knows, at some point down the line, maybe she comes on the channel and we have a conversation. I don't know. It's entirely up to her, but so that was yesterday, and then the day before yesterday, I posted very late in the day a video about being cell extracted in the Salinas Valley. So check those out if you're new to the channel or you haven't hit the little bell thing for the subscribe button so that you get notified. Please do that, and I'm back on the YouTube grind, right? So, anyways, this conversation, right, the earning of tattoos. I think there's a lot of kind of folklore or misunderstanding and rumors about it. So I'm gonna share with you guys some of my experiences being incarcerated and having homeboys with various tattoos and stuff, and just my take on it, and specifically from a northern perspective, of course, because that's what I'm most familiar with. Every prison gang has a particular symbol that represents them, and of course, if you have that symbol, you better be a member of that gang or that organization or whatever you want to call it, at least in California. And so I'm not getting into those, right? Those are pretty obvious. I think everybody knows what they are, but it's like one main thing for each group that says, hey, I'm a member of this. But there's tons of other tattoos, so that's what we're gonna get into. To start with is Solano. So it's like 90, I want to say 97. So I'm probably 20 years old, and a homeboy pulls up, level 3 yard. A homeboy pulls up from Tulare County, and he's a first timer. He's never been to YA. That's his first yard, right, straight from reception center. And this kid, what? I was a kid too, but so this dude has a star on his forehead, a star by his eye, a star on his elbow, a star on his wrist. I think that was it. And he didn't have a bunch of tattoos. He wasn't sleeved down or anything. All of these tattoos really stood out, and they were big, and they all really stood out. They were all filled in, if I remember correctly. And so we were like, damn, look at this guy. And it's not because in today's day and age, or even necessarily then, the star, meant you were absolutely a part of something. But there was a history there, particularly through the 80s, of stars placed in certain parts of the body, reflecting that you weren't just the average Northerner, right? You had made a level of commitment, and along with that, you had a level of schooling and education, and you were able to handle some responsibilities. And this kid was none of the above, and maybe he would go on to achieve that, but he definitely wasn't there that day when he pulled up to the yard and came out to yard. And so he was got at, right? And I was there for that conversation, and was essentially, kind of questioned, where'd you come from? Who are you with in the county? And just try to get an idea, fishing basically, to see what did he know. And he didn't know much, and all those tattoos came on the streets. And so he was told, here's your choices. You can get those tattoos covered up, and we had we had a few homeboys that did tattoos, but one in particular was picked and said, hey, the household will pay for it. So homeboy doesn't have to do the tattoos for free, but you also don't, have to pay for them out of pocket, right? The household will pay for it. And you get them covered up, and whatever you covered up with, that's, between you and him, right? You and the artist. So you can do that, or don't cover them up. You don't have to. We're not going to force you. But then you are going to be held accountable for behaving in such a way and basically bringing to the table what these tattoos suggest you're able to, and he wouldn't have been able to live up to that, right? He wouldn't have been able to be accountable, right? He'd have gotten in trouble like damn near immediately because he just really didn't know anything. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, and at the time I thought it was pretty fair, rather than just blast a dude or get carried away. It was like, hey, you got options. We're not going to make you remove the tattoos, but if you don't remove the tattoos, we're going to make you live up to what these tattoos suggest. And like I said, it's not that the star itself is this real clear indicator. Not everybody with a star is a part of this gang per se. But it did suggest a level of responsibility and a level of education that the kid didn't have. And it was really more for his own well-being. It's he could wind up someplace else where the fellas weren't quite as forgiving, maybe, or as understanding. It also makes him a target from the oppositions. Where people may look at him and be like, "Man, that's one of those guys," and he's just not. He doesn't have the experience of being in prison to even really kind of recognize that or anything. So it's sort of for his own well-being. And then also in terms of the administration, like you can mess around and get validated for these tattoos, and that would be messed up for you to get validated and go to the SU program. And back then it was indeterminate. You go to the SU, you stay there till you parole, snitch, or die. And so why subject yourself to that consequence when when it's not fitting? And so he elected to get them all covered up. He got like a girl on his head. I forget all of what he had, but he got them all covered up, and that was that. On that same yard, sometime later, we had a homeboy pull up Scooter from Yuba City, right, Arnie, and he pulled up, and I remember he came into Building 4, and we had night yard back then, so I come out to night yard. He wasn't able to come out. But because he had just arrived, but we come out to night yard, and in Solano, buildings 4, 5, and 6 was our side of the yard. Buildings 1, 2, and 3 was Southsiders in the woods. And so on the wall of building 4, facing like the basketball court, that little inlet area, was all the Northerners that really weren't with like the education and the politics and that kind of stuff. They were sort of doing their time, want to go home, that sort of thing. And then by building 6 was a lot of the Northerners that were in leadership or striving or whatever you want to call it. And it was unfortunate that there was that divide. I have plans on doing other videos about Solano and kind of explaining some of that because it was different. It was different. But yeah, so I go over there by building 4 to talk to the homeboy that came out, and he goes, "Hey man, one of your people came today." And I was like, "What do you mean one of my people?" And he's like, "Yeah, fool, one of your homeboys got off the bus." And I said, "What?" Like I wasn't understanding what he meant, right? I'm talking to another Northerner. I'm like, "What you mean?" And he's like, "This fool has XIV, a Welga bird, NR, and a star all on his neck." I was like, "What the fuck? How was that happen?" Right? How was he on the yard? Which was a legit question. Like, how are you not validated for these tattoos? And it turns out he was a bro, right? He was a structural member. I don't know. I don't know how he made it through without being validated. A lot of times on the yard, he would walk around with kind of a towel, on his neck and stuff. And it wasn't what I pictured. When he first told me, I was thinking this shit was all blasted everywhere. And it wasn't that big. It was some mix of those 4 symbols, 2 on one side and 2 on the other. But sure enough, so to the, even to the fellas, right? Certain tattoos kind of mean certain things, and the NR was pretty damn obvious, but so it happens. And then fast forward when I was in Salinas Valley, we get word, I was level 4, and we get word, hey, ain't no more none of this stuff, right? No more Welga birds, no more XIVs, no more Norte, no more 1-4s. You can get your city, right? You can get your city tattooed on you, but that's it. Nothing else gang related. And the reason was because people were getting validated based on tattoos. I've told the story before about a homeboy from Milpitas, not somebody that's ever been on YouTube, but a homeboy from Milpitas when I was in Pelican Bay. And part of what he got validated for was having a Huelga bird on him. And Tortuga from Colton, right, who was a validated Mexican Mafia member, was his neighbor. And, we were in the same pod. And Tortuga, Turtle, also had a Huelga bird tattooed on him. And the Huelga bird on him looked identical to the Huelga bird on homeboy from Milpitas. And so I'd actually got at him to see if he was willing to write a declaration while I appealed, homeboy's validation on his behalf, to argue that the Huelga bird cannot be a symbol, an absolute symbol of a particular prison gang if this individual, who is validated as the rival prison gang, has the same tattoo, right? Like, how can this tattoo mean you're in this group if, according to CDC, these two groups are blood feud rivals, and this individual who you said is absolutely a member of this group has the same thing? And so it didn't wind up getting homeboy's validation beat. Tortuga was on board with it, so props to him, and he didn't even like homeboy really. And so, but he stood up. I did a video about that, that I'll link to, on this or at the end or something. You guys can check it out. And this is obviously way before Into Hostilities. This is way before even those talks were happening. We were all slammed down in the shoe, but the level of respect and the idea of us against the system, still existed. And so it don't believe everything you hear all the time about how stuff was. But so where does this come? Now I look on YouTube and I see these hood vlogs. At TC Visuals is I think one of the better ones. And you see these guys who ain't really been nowhere, and they got big ass eye breaker tattoos, right? Of all kinds of stuff, huge XIVs, everything else. But we were told you couldn't do that stuff because we didn't want people getting validated, right? Getting snatched off the yard over tattoos. Northerners have pretty short numbers as it is in the California Department of Corrections. And again, this is before, any kind of into hostilities. And so it's, it was a problem. And that was in Salinas because I sometimes try to find a way to get around the rules. That's actually where I got Northern Raised tattooed on my back. So I got Northern in lowercase Old English across my upper back. And then in cursive in the middle, it says Raised. And that was my little, how can I put it? Like, okay, how do I bend the rules without breaking the rules? And so oddly enough, the ink fell out. Only tattoo I ever got where the ink fell out. So maybe it was like karma or something. But I was like, hey, it's not Norte, it's not Norteno, it's not XIV, it's not nothing else. I have Huelga Bird, I have 1-4. I have Norte, the word Norte tattooed on me. I have the Northern Raised on my back, which you can still kind of see. But that was, getting stuff like that was frowned upon, because of the attention that it drew. But in terms of, this means you are something, that's CDC's narrative. And I'd say on top of it being CDC's narrative, it's kind of a YA thing, and the reason I say that is I remember sitting, again, to go back to Solano, sitting in Solano and was with a couple homeboys that had B numbers and C numbers. These dudes have been down forever and been around, since the 70s. And so 70s, early 80s. And I remember a homeboy had come from YA, and he was like, hey, I was on school, this and that, and he wanted to get a Huelga bird tattoo. And he goes, I know what all the steps of the bird mean. And I'm sitting with these older cats just kind of soaking up game from them. And I remember one of them is like, oh, is that right? Is that right? What's it mean? School me. Right? And he's serious. And so this youngster goes on this thing, and for those that know, there is a school of thought, right? There's a training that each step, is a letter in a word, and each one of those letters, spells something out, and then you write a whole essay on that, and so and it varies, right, depending on who you talk to. Does it mean this? Does it mean that? But so homeboy's listening, and he's like, hey, if you want to participate in education on street, I got an assignment for you. And the dude's like, hey, what's that? He goes, forget everything you ever fucking learned, man. What kind of Pepsi generation shit is that? Right? And that stuff wound up becoming a part, as I noticed over the years. It really did become a part of the schooling, right? But I think a lot of that shit was kind of YA based stuff, and this effort to attach some grand symbolism and significance to everything. And so as the years have gone on, that's how a lot of this stuff became looked at. Each point of the star means this. Each step of the well guard means that. To have this tattoo, you must do this. To have this tattoo, you must do that. And it's just not reality, And I'm not going to say it was never reality. I wasn't in the prison system in the 80s. I was in juvenile hall, So I'm not going to say it was never reality. But shit got kind of blown up out of proportion. And people on the streets, as more people came home from prison and more people came home from YA, blasted back with all kinds of stuff, then people on the streets got it. And a lot of those people wound up catching cases, and then they came to prison, and some of them programmed real tough, and some of them fell off real early, and I'm sure everywhere in between. So the significance of those tattoos got watered down. And so this idea of earning, you'll have some people, I had to earn my dots in my neighborhood, to get dots on your knuckles. And others no, right? And well, my homeboys made me earn this. It's really just kind of generic, but it's not as if, oh, hey, I blasted this fool in the yard, right? Like I blasted somebody on the Steens Valley. I couldn't then turn around and be like, well, I want this tattoo to symbolize that I blasted this fool on the yard. No, for one, none of us could get any of those tattoos, regardless of work we were putting in or our status or any of that. Like, was nobody getting none of that shit. But also, that's just not really how it worked, in my time in prison, at least. And certainly I would say in the years since, I said, man, you got people in the streets getting all kinds of stuff. You got teenagers with huge things. So, did XIV used to kind of stand out and be viewed as maybe a little bit more than just a northerner, right? Than a norte or whatever? Sure. Does it absolutely signify something? No. Did you have to earn that? Well, maybe it depends on who you were around. It's just not so uniform. Like I said, there's a lot of hype around that. And I think some of that is pushed by people who have these tattoos who then want to make themselves seem more significant. Like, hey, fool, I got this tattoo and this tattoo makes me this. That tattoo does not make the man. The man makes the tattoo, right? I have seen people with really impressive ink, really out there ink, really affiliated ink that are cowards and degenerates and rats and snitches and bad charges and all kinds of shit. And I have seen people with very little to no tattoos that are incredibly committed and incredibly intelligent and incredibly dangerous, and everywhere in between. And so it really just all depends. While we're talking about tattoos, quick little note. My understanding of the rise of face tattoos in prison, and I heard this from a couple old timers when I was in there, because they started seeing youngsters come in with tattoos on their face a lot more, and I think that's more common in Southern California, or at least it was more common in Southern California first. I would see a lot more Southsiders on the yard from Southern California who had face tattoos. Now I feel like a lot of people are getting face tattoos, but even sometimes grown ass men, right? But that wasn't so common back then, at least from what I saw, and at least in the Bay Area, and even in prison, So people started to come in with that though, and what the old timers said is, a few of them, is back in the days, you used to be able to collect Social Security disability, SSI, if you got out of prison and you had a face tattoo. You could go down to the Social Security office and collect a check, right? You were considered disabled because the thought was nobody in their right fucking mind is going to put a tattoo on their face. So since you have a tattoo on your face, you are going to be very difficult to be employed. And so therefore, at least in the state of California, you can't get a job. You have a disability. That disability is the ink on your face, and that was an incentive for some people to get face tattoos, because then you go home and you get a paycheck. Again, that's a little bit before my time, so I can't say 100% sure. And I'm not saying that everybody got face tattoos for that reason, but it would make sense that that was maybe a factor for some folks. And then, not unsurprisingly, some of those folks wind up catching more cases and they come back to prison. So you have a lot of people in prison with face tattoos. Um, and I will say, in terms of ink in general, it's hard. A lot of people in society or folks that never been to prison, you see these guys get out the joint covered in ink, and you're like, man, what were you thinking? Why'd you do all that? And you got to keep in mind, especially if you're on the yard, right, in the general population, uh, everybody's getting tattooed. A lot of people are getting tattooed, whether it's gang related tattoos or not. And so you're in this little bubble, and in this bubble, you got a whole bunch of guys walking around with their shirts off and a bunch of tattoos. So it becomes normal. And so you're like, oh, I'm just gonna get these letters, big on me or whatever. And while out here in society, it would seem kind of odd to do that, right? Less so now because tattoos are becoming more acceptable, but just 10, 15 years ago, it was kind of unusual. It in prison, it wasn't. In prison, a lot of people you're bored, you're getting a bunch of tattoos, you're seeing a bunch of people in tattoos, so it just seems like the normal thing to do. And then you come home and you realize, man, there's a lot of people around me that are not covered from head to toe in ink, and you kind of stick out. Um, so so anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on that. I know I'm a little bit all over the place with this video. It was a late night last night, and I'm just trying to get some content out today, but cover a few things with this. So that's where that comes from. And I would say nowadays, the idea that somebody earns a tattoo, at least in terms of the North, no. Now again, the exception is, there's a specific tattoo for each group that's just for that group. And then words, But the other thing that threw me off, and I'll close with this, is while we were being told, hey, you can't get these tattoos because it makes you hot, and you're subject to being validated, and it draws police attention, and your job is to stay out there and secure the main lines and all this other stuff. I always found it interesting that it seemed to me damn near everybody who made that lifetime commitment, right? Damn near everybody who joined the NF then ran out and got it blasted on them, And so if the idea is to fly under the radar, I guess that goes out the window when you reach the top of the totem pole, because then you got fools with it. It's like they might be reserved by their tattoos, but then they achieve this ultimate goal of theirs, and they're quick to blast it on their head and their arm and their chest and all over the place. And it's like, man, but then you're gonna tell everybody else you can't get a 1-4 on you. Come on now. But hypocrisy is part of the game, right? It's what happens. And when you're in charge, you get to do whatever you want. And so so be it. But anyways, that's my thoughts on earning tattoos. I'm curious what you guys think, man, in your neighborhoods or from the folks that you grew up around or other states or whatever. But a lot of this shit is overblown, in my opinion, and increasingly overblown as time goes on, and tattoos are more normalized, and really nowadays, to be a gang member, all you got to do is dress up like a bunch of other people and post on Instagram and have some tattoos, and all of a sudden you're with the business. So times have changed. Anyways, help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. And stay tuned. Like I said, man, I'm dropping content every single day this month, and keep doing something different. Take care.